Fuck scripts. If you're in high ticket sales, scripts are for dorks. I'm going to show you guys how to do my proprietary framework of how to create an objectionless close without using scripts. Principles over tactics. It's more about the philosophy, the mental model that's going on in your mind that's going to give you the confidence to close deals. The scripts are not going to fucking save you. Even if you say all the words perfectly, even if I gave you exactly what to say and how to say it, and you copied me word for word, the script's not going to save you if you have social anxiety. You got to have authority. You got to know how to command respect. And that all comes from having a framework and not a fucking script that you're trying to memorize. So I'm going to go over my framework with you guys today. This is how I handle a sales call, doing high ticket sales, whether it's a program that costs $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $150,000 or more. This is how you close huge deals over the phone or on a Zoom meeting. This is how you sell expensive shit to rich people, which is a fucking cheat code in my opinion. So I call the method FRAME. This is an acronym to help me remember my 5-step process so I don't have to worry about objections. If you do this right, you don't get any of that bullshit at the end of the call of I need to talk to my wife. I need to think about it. It's not the right time for me. It's too expensive. If you're getting those kind of objections, this is going to save your life. This is going to change the game for you because you could eliminate the objections before they ever come up. So it all starts with F, which stands for frame, the interaction. Now, what do I mean by frame the interaction? What the fuck is a frame? You probably heard it before, but things are framed whether you like it or not. Every social situation, there's going to be a frame. It's the relationship is framed, the dynamic of that relationship, somebody's going to be framing it, and there's going to be a conflict when two frames collide. So for example, when you're talking to another businessman or you're negotiating, you're talking to a person who's like an alpha male, an A personality type. They know what they want. They take control. They have leadership skills. When you get in the room with that person or you're on a phone call with that person in sales, that guy's going to try to control the conversation and control the frame. He might take the customer frame where he wants you to do a dog and pony show for him, where you impress him with your stats or impress him with your data. He might take a logical frame where he wants to read more about you. He wants to learn more about your case studies or things like that. They want to do more research. That's an analytical frame. What you have to do is you have to control the frame before they control it. Because no matter what happens, somebody's going to control the frame. It might as well be you. If you're a closer and you want to get really good at digital sales, you have to learn how to do this. This is one of the most important parts of a sales call, is how the interaction is framed. And later on in the conversation, you're going to have to reframe certain things. Once you find out somebody's worldview and it's flawed, you have to reframe that worldview. So you have to become a master of framing the interaction and reframing limiting beliefs. So what do I mean by that? Well, in the beginning, this is the intro. This is like the first minute of a conversation. Before you actually get started with the sales process, before you get into your questions and your line of questioning, you want to frame the conversation. One of the best ways to do that is just to build a little bit of rapport in the beginning to show them you're a normal human being. Like what you up to, what's going on, how's your week been, things like that. That should only last about 10, maybe 20 seconds at the most. The next step is when you set the agenda of the call. And how you do this changes everything. So if you're in rapport with somebody and you're talking about their day or how they just had their second cup of coffee or they just got back from the gym, or a lot of sales guys, they try to be likable, they try to kiss ass, So they'll notice something about the person, like the guy has golf clubs in the back and he's like, oh, you golf? And they try to shoot the shit too much and try to be likable and try to become their friend. And a lot of sales trainers will say this, like people want to buy from the people they like, that they bro out with. I disagree completely. People buy from the people they respect. So when I go to the doctor's office for an appointment and the doctor tells me what medicine to take to solve my problem, he doesn't have to make a joke. He doesn't have to be likable. He doesn't have to make me laugh. He doesn't have to be my best friend. I see him as an authority figure in the field of medicine. So if I go there for a medical problem, I expect to give me serious advice on what to do next. And because I respect him as a doctor, I take his advice. Has nothing to do with him being likable or not. I don't need to like my doctor to take his advice. It's the same thing with high ticket sales. It's more about gaining their respect. And one of the quickest ways you could gain their respect and build authority is by taking control of the conversation and setting the frame, setting the agenda. So one of the ways that you start a call like this and you frame the interaction is you got to let them know that you're the one in charge. So I'll say things like, this is the way I run these calls. I want to learn a little bit more about your business and see if I could actually help you. I want to make sure there's 100% alignment before moving forward. And if I think it's a good fit, I'll explain what we got going on here and you can decide if you want to be a part of it or not. All right, let's get into it. Something like that. You could even start it off with, look, the way I run these calls is I want to find out where you're at now, where you want to be, and I could see if I could get you there or not. If I can't get you there, I'm not even going to ask you to do business with me. So you're letting them know that this is the agenda. You're the one in control of the agenda, and you're qualifying them. They have to impress you. They have to give you a good reason of why you're going to ask them for their business. It's not like you have to do a dog and pony show and dance around for them to impress them. You're the prize. You're the one that has the solution to their problem. So you're the prize they have to win. They have to impress you so that you could offer them the solution. Remember, everybody gets on a call. Nobody is going to get on a call with a sales rep unless they have a problem to solve. They have a problem already. That's why they're getting on a sales call in the first place. They have a specific problem they're trying to solve. They see your company as a possible solution, or else they wouldn't even be there in the first place. So if they want to solve a problem and you possibly have a solution, maybe one of the best solutions for them, you're going to figure that out on that call. And if you don't do that, if you don't set the frame, if you don't control the conversation, they're going to control it for you. I see this, a lot of weak sales reps do this all the time. They try to kiss ass. They try to pander to the audience. They try to relate to them and build rapport, way too much rapport. And then in the middle of that rapport, as you're building it, suddenly the customer gets kind of annoyed, like this, why is this guy trying to kiss my ass? Why is this guy smiling and calling me by my first name? I don't even know this guy. I could tell this guy is fake and phony and he's making me cringe. Fuck this guy. That's how they're going to feel. And they're going to try to control it by saying, wait, hold on, let's just get to the point. How much you guys charge? I just need a quote. Just give me a quote. Tell me what you do. Let's cut to the chase. Let's cut all the bullshit and get straight to the point. That's what a business owner, an entrepreneur, or anybody who is taking that frame, like a customer frame, if you're building too much rapport, they're going to interrupt you. And that's just the death of your sales call. Your call is going to be killed right there. If they're the one to switch from rapport to setting the frame, you're done. You just lost all respect. So you have to be the first one to switch from rapport into setting the agenda of the call. If not, you lose. You already lost. So make sure you frame the interaction like a leader, as an authority figure, and you're in control, and they have to qualify themselves to you. They have to earn your solution. That's the best way to start a call as a high ticket closer. The second step, number 2 out of the 5-step process, is R, which stands for reveal their shadow side. Now, this is probably the most time-consuming part of the call. If it's a 30-minute conversation, this is probably going to be 15 minutes of the call. So it's the majority, it's the most time-consuming part of the conversation. This is where you gather information, you ask questions to understand their worldview and understand their limiting beliefs. And depending on which questions you ask, you could come off as a professional who's an expert in their field. If you ask the wrong questions, you're going to come off as a sales guy reading a script. So that's why I don't like scripts. Of course, scripts help with training purposes, and it gives you an example of what to use on a sales call. But sales calls always get derailed when you're dealing with an actual human. You never know where it's going to go. And so it's better to understand the principles, the frameworks, and the philosophies than just trying to memorize a script or doing some tactics like that. So everybody has a social mask that they're wearing. Everybody has a mask that they show to the public, and this is what they want the public to know. And then they have a different side of themselves that they hide from the public. Everybody has a dark side. Everybody has a shadow side. Usually this is the side we don't want to show the public because it's based on our insecurities. It's based on our fears. It's based on worldviews that are based on things that we told ourselves when we were kids. And so we all have these limiting beliefs, flawed worldviews, if we didn't put a lot of thought into it. So before you want to pitch somebody, this is where most sales guys fuck this up. They jump into the pitch too fast. They try to close the deal way too fast without discovering somebody's shadow side, without understanding their limiting belief, without understanding what makes them tick. And so there's probably about 7 main beliefs that you have to uncover before you should pitch somebody. Before you jump into the pitch, before you start asking someone to do business with you, you should spend some time and understand a person's worldview. You want to understand all their limiting beliefs. This could be with a lot of different things. Let's say you're helping a business grow with marketing or advertising or something like that. Let's say you're a marketing agency and your clients are coming to you to help them get more customers and generate more leads. But they have a limiting belief about advertising because every time they tried to advertise, they lost money. Every time they tried to pay an agency to work with them, they lost money. They didn't get a good return on investment. These are limiting beliefs. It doesn't mean that advertising doesn't work or else nobody would advertise. It doesn't mean that agencies don't work or agencies wouldn't be successful. It just means it didn't work for them. It messed up the way they look at reality. And now they have a limiting belief. And if you uncover that, you could challenge that worldview before it ever becomes an objection towards the end of the call. If you don't understand their worldview and then you go in and pitch them advertising, now you're just going to get, they're just going to unload a bunch of objections onto you at that point. So it's better to uncover it first and then challenge it way before it becomes an objection. Because in the beginning, it's really just an obstacle in your way that you could overcome. Because if you could understand their limiting belief and then challenge it before you actually make a recommendation, it's so much more powerful because you're the one in control. You stay in control. You remain in control. So you want to ask questions like, well, tell me what you've done for marketing in the past. And this could be with fitness. It could be with relationships. It could be with a coaching program. I don't care what it is. It always works like this. You want to understand what their pains are, what their problem is. Everybody comes to solve a problem or reach a goal or get to their desired outcome. That's what sales is all about. That's what businesses are. They're a way, it's an exchange of value to solve a problem or to reach somebody's goal or desired outcome. So one of the 2 biggest beliefs that you have to understand about people is their pain, what keeps them up at night, which is almost like their own version of hell, a nightmare that they're in. And they all have a desired outcome they're trying to get to. Now, in between are all kinds of little limiting beliefs that are keeping them from taking action to reach their goal. Or every time they try to go reach their goal, they're coming across these obstacles that are like these pains and these problems that they need to solve. And that's why they're here on a call with you. Now you have to uncover what these are. It could also be time. It could be like they have a limiting belief about how long things take to succeed, or they have a limiting belief on how fast things could happen. So you have to understand, for example, if they think they could get rich overnight by taking a magic pill, then that's a limiting belief that you have to challenge right there. Like, this is not going to happen overnight. This takes some work. This takes some time. That's how you're going to gain their trust and look like an authority, because you're telling them things that all these other fake ass cringy sales guys won't tell them. You're being truthful. You're being brutally honest with them. That's going to gain their respect and see you as an authority figure because you're not afraid to tell the truth. Another thing could be the opposite of that, is they think it's going to take way longer than it really is. When you could probably get them to their goal within 3 months, they think it's going to take 12 months. And if you could get them there in 3 months instead of 12, they're going to want to work with you. They could see you as an authority figure. But if they think it's too good to be true, you have to address that and challenge that. So this portion of the call is all about just uncovering these different beliefs, like 7 or 8 of these beliefs. Their beliefs about money, their beliefs about return on investment and taking risks on money, their beliefs about the solutions you have, their belief about their future outcome and what's possible, the belief of their own problems. A lot of people misdiagnose their own problem. They don't really know where the problem comes from or what the root of the problem is. So sometimes if they misdiagnose it and you see they have a limiting belief in their worldview, or what they believe is flawed and it's not the truth, most sales guys are going to avoid that because they don't want to argue or they don't want to create conflict. They want to avoid tension. Tension is your best friend on a sales call like this. You shouldn't want to avoid it. In fact, you want to lean into it. That's what builds trust. When you're not afraid to call them out on their bullshit, that's what builds trust. They're going to see you different than everybody else out there, instead of just a kiss ass that's telling them anything they want to hear. They're trying to avoid conflict. Don't do that. Ask the tough questions. Don't be afraid to ask the tough questions that are going to challenge them and get them to finally admit. They should be saying things like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Let me give you an example. Let's say they don't believe in advertising and your solution has to do with advertising. And they say, yeah, I've tried a bunch of advertisements and it didn't work. So what do you think happened? Why do you think it didn't work? You just don't believe in advertising at all? Or you think it was something wrong with your offer, or something wrong with the ad itself, something wrong with the person you're doing it with? Another belief is, if they think they could do it on their own, why would they pay money to have somebody do it for them? If they think it could be done really easily and it's not that hard to do, why would they pay you to do it for them or to help them with it? So if they have a limiting belief that they could do it on their own and they can't, you have to challenge that. You have to challenge that and get them to admit, like, no, you're right. I can't do this on my own. I need help. Or if I did do it on my own, it would take way too long and I don't have the time. So I need somebody else to help me with this. That's the buying pocket. You do this by asking skilled questions for them to take off their social mask and tell you the truth. If you can't get to the truth, you're going to have a bunch of objections at the end of the calls. And that's why all these sales trainers out there will talk about how you got to be a master at handling objections. No, you got to be a master at uncovering their limiting beliefs before they even come up. Because objections are just limiting beliefs disguised as some bullshit that they tell themselves. So most objections are bullshit. They're just lies. And you can't believe that nonsense. But it's way more difficult to overcome the objection at the end when it becomes an objection than in the beginning of the call when all it is an obstacle. So overcome the obstacle before it becomes this gigantic objection at the end of the call. And you can eliminate objections before they even happen. All right, now let's move to the third step. So after this is only like 1 or 2 minutes. You frame the interaction. Now, sometimes during these questions, they might try to take control and jump in, or they might give you a limiting belief, Now you have to get good at reframing those limiting beliefs into positive beliefs. If you could reframe those limiting beliefs and turn them into positive beliefs that go along with your solution, it's going to be so much easier to close that deal. A stands for align with their worldview. So the third step out of the 5-step process is align with their worldview. What do I mean by aligning with their worldview? This is where you have to master the art of storytelling. You got to become a really good storyteller so that you can align with their worldview with a simple story. And this could take like 2 minutes in the call. This doesn't take a lot of time to align with their worldview, but in order to do it, you got to ask really intelligent, skilled questions, overcome these limiting beliefs. Once you have them and you've reframed them into positive beliefs, now you're going to tell a story that aligns with their desired outcome, their pain that they're trying to run away from, their what I always call their hell island. They're trying to run away from hell island and get to their heaven island, but there's this ocean in between that's filled with sharks and danger, and they just don't want to swim across. They know they need a bridge or some type of transportation to get to that island. Your solution needs to be positioned as the only bridge to get them to Heaven Island. And you could do that by telling a quick story right before you pitch. So before you ever get into the pitch, before you start explaining your solutions, before you ever get to your features and benefits, you want to tell a story that almost pre-pitches them. I mean, if you tell the story right, the pitch is just a formality because they could already tell what you do, how it's delivered, and what it's going to do to transform their life or their business even before you get into the pitch. It's really powerful. So, for example, if they told me over here that one of their biggest issues is getting new customers in the door as a business, that the reason why they can't get to 100 grand a month, whatever their goal was, and the reason why they're stuck at 30 grand is because they're not good at running ads themselves. They don't understand how to do marketing, and they need a professional to help them with their lead generation and their marketing. But they know that they've tried other solutions in the past and it didn't work, but they're not giving up. They're still looking into it. They're still open-minded to hiring a professional to help them, but they've been through the ringer. They've had these bad experiences. So one way I could align with that worldview, just as an example, is I could tell them a story. I could say, you know what? You remind me exactly like one of my other clients. They were in the exact same situation as you. They got stuck at 30 grand a month. They didn't know how to do advertising or marketing. They weren't good at that stuff. They were really good at what they did, but they just couldn't crack the code for marketing. They went through a bunch of shitty agencies and didn't get a good return on investment. They were a little disgruntled. They were discouraged. And then they came to us. And the stuff we do is really unique, and it's not for every business owner, but for this company, it was a fucking game changer. And he thought it was going to take him like a year to get to 100 grand a month. We got him there in 90 days. All he did was trust in our process. We signed up. Within 90 days, he went from 30 grand to 100 grand, just like you want to get to. Now, you say something like that, now they could identify with the character in the story. So your client that reminds you of him is in the same position as him. Now he's relating to that guy. He's picturing himself and putting himself in the shoes of the lead character of your story. And if you get really good at storytelling like this, people are going to really be at the edge of their seat, listening to you, listening and hanging on every word. And not only that, is the story's going to be super relatable because it's just like their business. It's just like them. Similar goals, similar pains, and they can relate to it. Now, when you tell a story like that, and then at the end you say, well, I think we could do something similar for you if you want. I mean, I could explain how our program works A to Z if you want. You tell me, where do we go from here? And you basically give them the power right at that moment, right after you tell a story, right when you align with their worldview. You give them the power to ask for permission for the pitch. So now you're going to go into the pitch, which is the next step. But before you motivate them to take action, before you get into the pitch, you want them to admit that they relate to you, that they should be begging you for a pitch at this point. Like, tell me more about what you do. They should be saying something like, yeah, man, tell me how you guys would do it. Can you do the same thing for me that you did for him? Tell me more about your program. I want to know exactly how it works. And then you say something like, well, I could explain it all from A to Z if you want. You tell me, where do we go from here? And they get the choice to move forward. Now they're asking you. You ask them permission to pitch. They're giving you permission to pitch. Now you're moving on. Most people fuck this up. They don't get permission. They don't align with their worldview. They don't tell a story. They just go straight into the pitch. And then boom, now the guy the whole time just feels like, damn, this guy's a salesman. He's selling me something. And then at the end, if they have any of these limiting beliefs, you couldn't catch them ahead of time. So they turn into these big fears that you didn't address early on. And by the time they get to the price point and they're about to make a decision, they're overwhelmed with all these fears and limiting beliefs that you couldn't overcome. Now they become these crazy objections, and they'll lie to you. They'll create a smokescreen and they'll say something like, I need to think about it. When really what it is their belief in advertising or some weird limiting belief they have about other solutions or timeline or money or return on investment. One of these things that they're afraid to admit because they're still hiding that side of themselves. You didn't reveal their shadow side, so now they're lying to you and you only are talking to their social mask, the version of themselves that they admit to the public, the version of themselves they're not afraid to admit. So then they'll lie to you because people don't want to be incongruent with their character. They don't want to be incongruent with their identity. So when you get them to reveal their true identity, it's much more difficult for them to give you an objection that's based off a lie or a delusion or a fear, because they want to align with their true self that they were telling you about earlier in the call. So it's going to come back to help you later on. All right. So once you tell that story, now there's other ways to align with their worldview. It doesn't have to be a story. You could do it by giving them some insights. You could give them 2 or 3 very intelligent insights about their business or about weight loss or about if it's nutrition, it could be a nutrition thing or meal planning. If it's relationships, it could be some kind of psychology thing. Or the point is you're giving them insights or knowledge about a potential solution. And it's kind of like a pre-pitch. Now it's more advanced. You got to really be an expert and know your medicine, know your stuff for to do insight-based alignment. So in the beginning, when you're first starting out, have 2 or 3 really good stories. Have like an origin story for yourself, so you could always tell the story about how you got into this and how you became an expert. Then have a good before and after story of one of your clients, and a good story that overcomes some of the typical limiting beliefs that most of your type of prospects will have. And every industry is different. Every niche is going to be slightly different with the story you're telling. That's why it's important, if you're in sales, that you're selling something you truly believe in, something that has results, a viable offer on the marketplace that has testimonials, case studies, proven success. So that way you could get behind that and you could tell those real stories and people could see your authenticity and they could hear it in your voice that you're being real. All right, so step 4 out of the frame method is motivate to take action. So you got to motivate them to take action. This is where you finally get to the pitch. But I have a very specific process for pitching. I don't think of it as I'm going to like walk them through the features and how it all works and how the sausage is made and my cool proprietary frameworks and all this stuff and all my patented technology. No, fuck that. What you want to do is you want to focus on the transformation of what the product or service does. What's the before and after? Kind of like what you did here with the alignment, with the storyline. But I have a formula for how I motivate them. It starts with a big promise of transformation. That's the first step. It's a promise. A big promise. BP, big promise. This is just a one-liner of what your service or product does for them. Just a one-liner, a promise. Now, it should include like a timeline. We help guys get X results in X amount of time or in Z amount of time or whatever. We help people scale their business to 100 grand a month, and we've done it in as little as 90 days, things like that. So you have a big promise of transformation. Then after that, this is like the bulk of the fourth step is going to be the bridge, which I have like 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 bullet points. And you could customize this depending on the person and depending on how they answer these questions earlier on in the conversation. You could customize it, but that's advanced. So before you get into the on the call, off the cuff customization, you should just have 1 or 2, 3 bullets to represent your product. So there's always like 3 or 4 different things. That could be like one of the main benefits and the main deliverables that you guys are delivering in your, whether, let's say it's a coaching program, it could be a business service, whatever it is. And each one is probably like a little story or a one-liner to explain it. And then you don't want to talk too much. You don't want to deliver a speech. You want to make it more of a conversation instead of a presentation. And so in between each bullet, you want to get them involved, like by saying things like, does that make sense? Like, if we could help you with that, would you be able to show up? If I was able to show you step by step what to do, can you at least put in 5-6 hours a week to implement it? Things like that. So you want to kind of tie them down with certain questions in between the bullets, so you don't just keep talking and talking and talking. Because if you do that, if you talk for like a minute or 2 straight without taking a break and talking to them, they're going to lose their attention span. So it's better to get them to interact with you during this part of the process, because this could take a long time. If you just went through all 3 or 4 bullets in a row without stopping and asking them questions, that's like a 10-minute long rant. And they're going to fall asleep by the time they get to like 6 or 7 minutes in. So don't do that. Right after you're done with the bridge, you're going to go into the deliverables, or delivery for short. So this is the next steps of how to deliver it, how we get it to them, how they transform their business, their body, whatever it is, their fitness. There's a delivery of transformation. Now, if you guys want me to do a deep dive in each one of these steps, click the link in the description, and you guys could join my free community where I do trainings like this all the time. So let me know if you want to do a deep dive and get the full example of the pitch framework. Just each one of these, by the way, the R, the reveal the shadow side, I have a special framework for this section. I have a special framework for the pitch. And then I have trainings on the art of storytelling, so you can get really good at aligning with their worldview. Join my free community, link in the description. Now, once you motivate them to take action, now they're ready. They're like excited. They're ready to go. But if you just go jump into it like most sales guys do, right after the pitch, they just ask for the money. I don't do that, because usually if you go straight from motivating them with all your pitch stuff and all the delivery and all the bullets and all the benefits, and then you go straight into asking them for their money, it's going to create some red flags. Alarms are going to go off in their head like, wait a minute, I just got sold, and nobody wants to be sold. So this part of the process is really important. E stands for elicit emotions. So before somebody wants to buy something, they make decisions based on their emotions. They justify it with logic. So most of the motivation part was you taking all their emotional goals and desired outcomes and pains and twisting the knife in their pain and getting them to describe their desires to a T and all their limiting beliefs. Now here, you just customize this pitch that caters to this worldview. You told a story that aligns with it. You overcame all their limiting beliefs. Well, because of the bullet points, you wanted to give them logical reasons to buy. So you're justifying all these emotions up here, and you're justifying them with logical delivery systems, transformation, things that could, like, this is the step-by-step process. This is step 1. This is step 2. This is step 3. That puts them into a logical mode, even if you're using emotional language. And so if you jump right into the money part and start collecting their credit card before you elicit these emotions, they're going to be in this logical frame and they're going to want more time to think about it. That's usually when you get this, everything's great. I love everything. I'll let you know what I want to do by Friday. Or, you know what, you gave me a lot to think about. I love everything you're saying. Give me a couple days. I need to mull this over. That's because you're selling to their logical brain and not their emotional side. So before I ask for the money, before I go in for the close, I want to get them excited again with emotions. So I start with doing something called a temp check. Temp check is where I just kind of check in to see how they feel through this motivational process. So after they heard the entire pitch, they know exactly what we do. They know the promise of transformation. They know the bullets and the bridge of how to get there. They know the deliverables. Now you ask them, so how do you feel about everything? You feeling good? You like the plan? And you just ask them a simple question like that to check in. I don't say, what do you think? I say, how do you feel? How do you feel about everything? It's really subtle. Usually, if you do a good job of motivating and you did a good story in the align with their worldview part, if you did a good job in the beginning, they're going to say something like, I love it. I feel good. I feel great. All right, cool. Well, you're feeling pretty good. So let's get really specific. I want to get really clear before we move forward. I only have a few spots left. I can't just offer this to everybody. We're a boutique company. And so I'm looking to build a handful, like a little pod of guys to work with. You seem like you're a good fit too. I like you. I've enjoyed our conversation together. But before we move forward, I want to get perfectly clear and just make sure there's 100% alignment. So why don't you tell me on a scale from 1 to 10? 10 is like, hell yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. Sign me up. 1 is like, fuck this guy. I just want to get off the phone. Where do you stand on a scale from 1 to 10? How do you feel? And then they'll say something like, if they're like an 8 or a 9, you're like, oh shit, you're feeling pretty good then. So what does an 8 out of 9 or what does an 8 out of 10 mean to you? I know it means something different to everybody. So what does an 8 out of 10 mean to you? And then they'll explain their limiting beliefs right then, because there's a reason why they're not a 10 or a 9 and they're only an 8. And so it means there's something in them that's holding them back. There's some type of limiting belief that they have. And it's so much more powerful to ask them before you drop the investment, before you start talking about money and asking them for their credit card information and signing them up. It's so much more powerful to address these limiting beliefs before, because once they know the price, they'll just bounce and say, oh, they feel pressure at that point. But when you do it right now with the temp check, right in the beginning of this section, their guard is down. They're feeling good about everything. And now you're asking them to give you some honest feedback on how they feel. Now, if they're anything less than like a 7, then you might want to sit there and really dig deeper and ask them more questions to find out why they're a 7 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10. And they'll usually admit something along those lines right then. Well, the reason why I'm not a 10 is because I'm still a little concerned about the timeline. I think this might take a little too long for me to get a return on investment, and I'm a little concerned about that. Okay, well, let's talk about timeline then. So what's your concern exactly? And then you go in and you address timeline. Now, when you're addressing timeline like that, it's just a limiting belief that you got to reframe. But when they're telling you, I don't know if this is going to work for me because of the timeline after you drop the price, now you come off as a douchebag, as a sleazy sales guy that's trying to pressure them into moving forward. But if you do it before, now you have the moral high ground. You're just trying to help them and understand what it is. Plus you said, look, before we move forward, I want to make sure there's 100% alignment. I could only take on a few more guys this month. So before we move forward, tell me how you feel about everything to make sure, because I want to make sure you're the right fit for us. So then they're going to be honest because they feel like they might miss out on the opportunity after they just heard everything. They're all motivated. They're at the edge of their seat. They're excited. And then you're like, wait, but hold on. Before I ask you to do business with me, before I even move forward, how do you feel? So it's almost like they have to qualify themselves to us and prove to us that they're serious. But when you do it after the price, it doesn't work like that. So keep that in mind. So once I get the temp check, I find out that they have fears or doubts or limiting beliefs. I overcome those by pacing the objection and isolating it. Pacing it just means like, all right, well, besides that, besides the timeline thing, is there anything else you're concerned about? Is there anything else that you're worried about that's stopping you from moving forward? Is it just the timeline thing that you mentioned? Is that the only thing you're concerned about? You could be real with me. That's isolating it. I paced it, then I isolated to find out if that's really the true objection, because some people will lie and bullshit you about those objections. And then they say, yeah, it's just the timeline. I'm just a little concerned. Then boom, you just explain, you reframe the timeline or whatever it is. It's so much easier to do at that point. And then you say, okay, so now that you know the timeline's going to take this much, how do you feel now? You feel better? Are you higher than an 8 now? Do you feel like you're a 9 out of 10? Are you closer to that 10? Now I feel like I'm a 10 out of 10. All right, cool. You ready to get started? You ready for the next steps? All right, cool. Then you get into the next steps. And the next steps right here, right before you get into it, you could even drop a couple like different frames. Like you could say something like, look, we are very specific with who we work with. We only work with companies that follow along with X, Y, and Z. We don't do any shady companies or fly-by-nights. We got to be very selective because we can only work with a handful of guys at a time. So you understand that, right? So I just want to make sure you're excited about this before we talk about the next steps. Are you 100% in? You ready? Hell yeah, I'm ready. All right, cool. Let's talk about the next steps. And then what I usually do at that point is to elicit their emotion, I'll drop the price. But before I do, I pace the future and talk about it. So I want them to imagine what happens after they pay. What happens when they drop their credit card? What happens when they swipe their credit card and actually fork over cash flow or wire the money to us? What happens next? I want them to imagine it before I ask them for the money. And it builds more trust, makes them feel a little bit more secure. So I say something like, all right, these are the next steps. First, we're going to take care of the investment. You could process that directly with me. You could do credit card. You could do Zelle, whatever you want. We authorize the agreement. You just got to do a digital signature. Really easy. Takes like 3 minutes. After that, we set up your onboarding call with our team. That's when we're going to break everything down, your strategy. You get access to all your trainings. You get your implementation packet, all that stuff. Make sense? All right, cool. The total investment is $12K. And then just shut up and listen. The total investment's $12K. And just shut up. Sound confident, poker face. Don't sound insecure about it. Just be strong and wait for their reaction. Put yourself on mute if you have to, if it's making you feel uncomfortable. Just wait for them to think. Let the wheels turn. They might say something like, do you expect me to pay that today all up front? Or can you guys break that up into a payment plan? They might ask questions like that. Or they might say something like, okay, this all looks great. I just need to run this by my wife. Now, if they say that, that means you fucked up in the beginning because you should have brought up the partners and the wife and all that stuff ahead of time and overcome that limiting belief before it happens. But at that point, you might get a little bit of last minute resistance. But if you do this right, there should be 0 objections. And they'll just be like, all right, what's the next step? All right, here's the credit card. What's your billing address? I've closed so many deals like that. Just what's your billing address? They give it to you. All right, you spell your last name like this, S-M-I-T-H. Is that correct? All right, cool. Go ahead with the credit card number when you're ready. That's it. That's how you close a deal using the frame method. Start using this on your calls and you're going to see you're getting way less objections, fewer objections at the end of the call. Way more people are going to be reacting to you in a different way, treating you with more respect. They're going to be closing a lot easier. They're going to be willing to give up their credit card and pay you right then and there on a one call, one close. Follow the frame method. If you like this, if you got some value from it, like the video, subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Check out the link in the description. I'll see you guys on the next one.